Hi, I'm Fabi, and the reason why I'm standing here today is I have gone through the 25 cognitive biases as laid out by Charlie Munger, and I have built a framework upon which I'm able to look at different trends in the market. I'm looking at social media, I'm looking at what young people are doing, saying, and buying, and I'm able to be really, really early to trends. It's really down to becoming addicted to social media, being there all day, every day. I've done a lot of the work for you so that you don't have to, but I will give you my thoughts and my conclusions, but I am hoping that you're going to come out of this talk and you're going to be able to take this framework and use it to see what's coming next and what is the hot next thing going to be. That, if you depend on an expert to feed you that, that's a problem, right? We want to become independent thinkers, independent investors. But in order to do that, there must be a framework. And so in order to build that framework, you have to understand, how are you early to trends? Well, in my particular case, I'm lucky enough to be addicted to something that actually brings me a profit, which is social media. So when I'm on Twitter, when I'm on YouTube, I'm able to see the trends really, really early. How early? You should be asking this. Well, you might have heard about something called Bitcoin. I bought it in 2011 at $4.80. Made zero money from it, which is a different matter altogether, but another talk for another day. For uranium, for example, I got into uranium in 2014, several years ago, before most people my age could even spell uranium, to be perfectly honest. So having said that, because I have a pulse on the market, I'm going to tell you how you can start watching for the signs so that when this happens again, then you understand what's going on. That's why I'm calling this the anatomy of a bull market as experienced in uranium. But I am not going to go too deep into the uranium thesis because any of the companies out here that deal in uranium, that are looking for uranium, that are about to produce uranium, they can tell you the story about supply and demand imbalance. That's basically it. We produce uranium, we consume a lot more than what we're producing. There's a lag in the market because we're dealing with mining. Everything is very slow to catch up. And so it's a matter of looking at, are we going to need to continue to have electricity? Are younger people like me and younger people yet going to use more or less electricity? Can the grid really sustain electric cars and things like that? Those are very obvious answers. And in order to sustain that, we're going to have to build out more nuclear capacity, more solar, more wind, more of everything. So when I got on Twitter, I started to see something really, really interesting. And I tweeted this out in 2018, okay? This was by far the tweet that got the most popular, and it was the tweet that was the easiest trend that I observed. So I predict a uranium craze as obnoxious as silver bug proliferation in 2010, 2011. If you're wondering what happened during that time, there was these crazy guys in basements buying monster boxes of silver coin and putting that on video, and those videos were getting thousands of views. This was the thing. This happened, right? And a lot of millennials actually got into mining because of this, right? And what happened to the share price during that time? Well, the actual share prices of silver companies went completely wild, but the actual price of silver, the underlying fundamental was there. Therefore, you saw silver go from 10, 15 to almost $50 again, just like the Hunter brothers way back when in 1980, right? And so this happened, and this is going to happen again and again and again and again because young people, when they really believe in something and they invest their time, they also invest their money into it. And so it becomes part of their identity. And that's the conclusion that I'm going to get to. in just a second. Now, why is this happening? The one thing that most people get wrong when they look at trends that are becoming really hot in investing is that they don't understand that nowadays information is no longer asymmetric. So it used to be that way back in 1929, when the Kennedys were investing in the stock market in the US, there's the shoeshine boy story, right? We all know about this. If you're hearing stock picks from your shoeshine boy, it's the top of the market. You got to get out. We all know this story. However, the reality is today, the shoeshine boy has a phone in his pocket and maybe information that's more accurate than what you've been getting, even as an analyst. So the shoeshine boy today sometimes sees trends that you will see years from now. And so the crazies, the uranium bugs, the silver bugs, and all the people that are really, really intense about investing in a certain asset, a lot of them are not just laggards. So this is a really famous bell curve that tries to explain basically the adoption rate of any technology or new idea or concept, right? So this is really popular in the startup world. So you have the innovators, which are the people who are coming up with new stuff. And then you have early adopters, the people in the middle are majority and early majority and late majority, but then you have the laggards. So laggards in investing terms are the people you don't want to follow. They're too late to the party. You know, the fundamental story doesn't make any sense anymore, but they're still cheering on. And they're like, you know, to the moon, Lambo, whatever, but there's no substance to the fundamental thesis. And they don't even know why they're buying the stuff that they're buying. Today, we don't have the crazies just at the very end of the adoption curve. We also have them towards the beginning, right? They are looking at really quality research on their phones, on demand, very, very quickly. So one thing that I get a lot is I get asked, so isn't it too late to get into uranium? Because, you know, I saw so many tweets out, so many people are talking about it. There's a buzz. I recognize there's a buzz. And I was there from the very beginning, so I've seen this develop. The question is, are we talking about the crazy bugs towards the beginning of the adoption rate, or are we talking about it towards the end? And that's what we're going to look at today. You have to understand what game you're playing. So in order to put money to work in any of the companies that are out here, you have to know your reason for doing it. You can play what I like to call the S&D game, which is supply versus demand. If there's a real supply imbalance and a demand that's growing, guess what? That's a solid thesis. That's something that can go on for many, many years because this market is very slow. And so price takes a very long time to catch up to the underlying structure of the market. You can also look for discovery. So maybe you're out here looking for explorers and you think that the price of that company is going to go up because they're going to find something that has economic value. Great. But you also can look at financials. So you can look at the royalty companies or the producers and you can say, you know what, compared to this, that, and the other, they're cheap. Or you can look at technical analysis, which in the mining world, I don't recommend. Maybe it's good support for when to buy, but not what to buy. So uranium is essentially a very, very strong, long-running S&D play. It's a supply and demand imbalance that has gotten much worse, much more quickly than most people have predicted. So you could talk about China doubling their nuclear capacity in the next 10 to 15 years. You can talk about the fact that solar and wind hasn't really filled the gap that we imagined that they would. You can talk about the fact that, yeah, there's a little something there happening in the eastern side of Europe that might actually make it a little bit harder to get uranium, and a lot of uranium goes through Russia to be processed. And so there are many, many factors as to why that is. And you can see the supply gap there that goes out all the way to 2040. And that is going to be reflected in the price. It has already picked up quite a bit when I started investing. a pound of uranium was $18. Right now, it's 48, 47 bucks. People are crying because they expect it to be 100 tomorrow, okay? The expectations get a little bit bubbly at times, but that's the market will do what the market will do, okay? And everything takes a little bit longer. So I'm gonna tell you the key ingredients now that make a bull market from retail perspective, okay? There are many people outside of this room that would absolutely love to be in here. They don't understand the opportunity. And in order for them to understand the opportunity, we have to make sure that we have certain ingredients in our communication to get the word out so that they get it and they invest in things that actually make sense in the long run. We have here the triple whammy. So the triple whammy is excitement, comparison, and gain. When I tell you that in the last cycle, you had the worst explorers or the worst companies do a 10-bagger to a 15-bagger, and that cycle will happen again, you have 3 extremely strong mind triggers that make every investor with a pulse absolutely salivate. So you're excited about something, you know it's happened before, it's cyclical, you compare it to something that is verifiable because you can go back and check the price, it really happened, and there's obvious gain to be had because a 10-bagger as one of your worst performers is quite something. So there's also certainty, and most of the narrative around silver and gold has unfortunately failed in this regard. Either the price of uranium goes up or, you guys know it, the lights go out. Because of this intense certainty that we have that uranium will be needed in the future, that actually fits with our internal need as human beings to bet on things that we know for sure are going to happen. We don't know for sure about the demand for gold 10 years from now or 5 years from now, but we know that we're still going to have to live this lifestyle of having the lights on, of using more electricity. And electricity usage, as far as I know, has never gone down. And that's going to continue. We don't have to convince anybody of that. So based on that premise, you have certainty that the thesis will play out. The other thing, and I love German people, by the way, but this is true. One of the reasons why uranium became so popular is that it also has a common enemy. So some countries and some states have been doing it all wrong when it comes to nuclear power. You know, they're switching off their nuclear plants and they're saying no, and they're paying the price today. So you have a common enemy in countries that are not getting nuclear. You also have a common enemy in short sellers and sometimes traders that are not really seeing the trade from our perspective. And the other thing that you have is once you get the community talking about these things, it spreads out, right? So a common enemy, I mean, people go to war on this alone. It's a very, very strong trigger, and it works. Mystery, how deep and how liquid is the market? We don't know. We're trying to find out. Is Sprott going to be able to corner the market? That's a question in people's minds, truly. How high is the price going to go this time? How high can it go? What is really the incentive price for new uranium production to come online? There are many unknowns. And that is actually part of the reason why this is such an interesting thing to invest in. There's also leadership. This is something that could also be worked on in a lot of other assets. I think they're missing the boat on this. There are certain people who have more experience, that have been through the cycles, that have made a lot of money, that are coming out and saying, we're buying uranium. We're buying uranium stocks, we're buying uranium in the spot market, and we like it because of this, that, and the other. This is very important. Human beings need leaders. And this is amplified when you're talking about investing, because that's the way that people use, especially newcomers. We need to be able to filter out what's good and what's bad, and then we rely on experts naturally. So you absolutely need leadership. And there's also social proof. I don't think it's accidental that the worst kind of punishment you can put a human being through is solitary confinement. We were built to be in small villages of 150 people, round about that. And so everybody wants to be a contrarian, they say, in the circle. Therefore, nobody is. The reality is we want to find our little crowd that believes in the thesis, and then that crowd actually gets bigger and bigger. But you absolutely need somebody else to be invested in that same theme in order for it to gain any strength whatsoever. You can't be the lone wolf. Lone wolves do not make a bull market. And the result of that is you get identity. People don't realize, as I said, that the crazies are on both sides of the adoption curve, which means that there are people coming online right now and getting thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of followers, and they call themselves uranium investors. They take on that identity. So something that's very important that I want you to take away from this, when you see this, it doesn't necessarily mean that the bull market is over, that the thesis is over, because those could be the crazies at the very beginning of it. What can dictate if you're late or if you're early is going back to the fundamentals. So you must look at the fundamentals. Can you point to a number that tells you that it's still a strong thesis? And with uranium, we produce, 140 million pounds of the stuff and consume 190 per year. There's a massive, absolutely massive gap there that is going to have to be filled somehow. And if you can point to a number, and that number is not getting any better, or it's still large enough, and the price has not appreciated enough, then guess what? You still have a very strong thesis. And I believe the bull market is not over, because supply and demand is really what matters, right? The bull market, the engine of the bull market is supply and demand. This just amplifies it. This makes everything bigger. This makes all of us here make a lot more money, and that's important. What's the downside risk of this kind of behavior? Well, cults are very difficult to leave. Right? Once you want to leave this thesis of uranium or of investing in silver or of anything else, then guess what? People will start to criticize you. Sometimes there's really bad information that's being spread within these forums and these chats and these conversations. It happens. But then again, you got to go back to the numbers. If the numbers tell you a different story, then we're probably not really at the very end of that curve. And something else that I have to tell you is the people who are asking me, okay, what's next? Well, first of all, uranium is massively on sale. So mark this date. Look at everybody who's here and is a uranium company. Look at their share price. There are some real bargains to be had. I'm not associated with any of them, but I'm just telling you from my own portfolio's perspective, I really want to buy some more. And what I've been seeing, what's next, is actually a question that I am going to ask you, and you're going to be able to answer what's next. After having seen everything that I've shown you today, I'm going to ask you, Hershey's chocolate. I'm not talking about chocolate in general. I'm talking about Hershey's chocolate, the company. Mostly a North American company that produces candy bars. Do you believe that the future energy needs that my generation has, that your generation has, and that the future generations have, will be sustained by a fuel whose combined market caps is worth less than one chocolate company? because Hershey's right now is worth $46 billion. Just Hershey's. Don't get me started on Mars and all my other favorite brands. Just Hershey's is $46 billion. Uranium, we're talking less than 40. So you tell me, are we too late? Or are we the crazies at the beginning? Happy investing. Thank you.